The person who disappeared from your story is back. And they did not return with an apology. They returned with proof. Proof that could finally explain why the person you loved walked away. Why conversations suddenly changed. And why a love that once felt impossible to break somehow collapsed without a real explanation. But the most shocking part is this: your soulmate may have spent all this time believing the wrong version of what happened. Listen carefully, because what was brought back from your past could completely change the meaning of everything you thought you lost. For a long time, there was one unanswered question hanging over your love story. Something happened between you and your soulmate that never seemed to make complete sense. Maybe there was a sudden distance. Maybe promises that once sounded certain became hesitation. Maybe your soulmate started behaving differently without giving you the explanation you deserved. From the outside, people may have assumed the relationship simply failed. They may have said the timing was wrong, the feelings changed, or the two of you were never supposed to make it. But somewhere beneath all of those explanations was something neither of you could see clearly. Someone else had been influencing the story. And now, one person from your past has returned because they can no longer remain silent about what they witnessed. This person remembers the days before everything changed. They remember conversations that happened when you were not present. They remember certain words being repeated about you, certain doubts being planted, and certain information being passed to your soulmate as though it were unquestionable truth. At the time, this person stayed quiet. Maybe they were afraid of becoming involved. Maybe they believed the truth would eventually reveal itself. Or perhaps they did not understand how serious the consequences would become. But then your love story fell apart. And years, months, or perhaps only a painful stretch of time passed while this person carried the knowledge that something important had never been exposed. Now they have returned carrying something that cannot easily be dismissed. Not a rumor. Not another emotional opinion. Something tangible. A saved message. A dated conversation. A forgotten photograph. A document. Something preserved from the exact period when everything between you and your soulmate began changing. And when your soulmate first saw it, they did not immediately speak. They simply stared. Because suddenly, the timeline started making sense. The moment they began doubting you. The conversation that made them pull away. The reason they believed you had stopped caring. The reason they thought choosing distance was their only option. Piece by piece, everything began connecting. Don't skip this, because the person from your past did not return simply to expose another person. They returned because there was one specific detail inside that proof that involved you directly. Your soulmate had apparently been shown something about you long ago. Something presented in a way that made your intentions look completely different from what they actually were. Perhaps words were taken out of context. Perhaps part of a message was deliberately left out. Perhaps someone claimed you had made a decision that you never actually made. Whatever happened, your soulmate accepted it because it came from someone they believed they could trust. That trust became the weapon that separated you. And this is where the person from your past finally admitted something painful. They knew. Maybe not everything. But enough. Enough to realize that your soulmate was being pushed toward a conclusion about you that was not fair. Enough to notice that someone seemed strangely determined to keep the two of you from having one honest conversation. Enough to understand that every time you came close to fixing things, another misunderstanding suddenly appeared. For the first time, your soulmate began looking back at the past without anger. They began looking at it with questions. Why had they never asked you directly? Why had they trusted another person's version before hearing yours? Why did so many strange things happen exactly when the relationship was becoming serious? And then came the question that made the entire room quiet. Your soulmate looked at the person holding the proof and asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" The answer was not dramatic. It was painfully simple. Because you still think they were the reason everything ended. Those words landed differently. Your soulmate had spent so much time trying to accept the ending that they had never seriously considered whether the ending itself had been built on something false. Then the person from your past revealed there was more. What your soulmate had just seen was only the first piece. There was another piece of proof, something they had kept hidden because revealing it would expose exactly who had interfered, what they had said, and why they were so determined to make sure you and your soulmate never discovered the truth. Your soulmate reached for it. But before handing it over, the person from your past gave one warning. Once you see this, you will never look at your love story the same way again. And when your soulmate finally opened what had been hidden all this time, they saw your name. Right beside a conversation they had never known existed. Your soulmate kept staring at your name, almost as if seeing it there had pulled them back into a chapter of their life they had spent so long trying to close. Their hands tightened around the proof while the person from your past remained silent. There was no need to explain anything yet. The dates were there. The words were there. And most importantly, the sequence of events was there. Your soulmate could finally see that the story they had believed for so long had not begun with your decision to leave, betray them, or stop caring. It had begun with a conversation that took place without you knowing. Someone had carefully created a version of you that did not match the person your soulmate had actually known. They had been told that you were preparing to move on. They had been made to believe that you were hiding your true intentions. And whenever your soulmate considered contacting you directly, another piece of information mysteriously appeared to convince them that reaching out would only lead to rejection. The person from your past finally pointed toward one particular date. "Look at this carefully," they said. Your soulmate recognized it immediately. It was the same day everything between the two of you had changed. Until that day, there had still been hope. There had still been unfinished conversations, feelings neither of you had completely surrendered, and a possibility that one honest meeting could have repaired what was breaking. But that evening, your soulmate received information that made them believe you had already chosen a future without them. What they had never known was that only hours earlier, someone had contacted the person from your past and asked a very strange question about you. That question was now preserved inside the evidence. Do they still believe these two will find their way back to each other? Your soulmate read the sentence twice. Why would anyone need to know that? Why would someone be worried about whether you and your soulmate could reconcile unless they had a reason to prevent it? The next message made the answer even more disturbing. It revealed that this person had been watching the situation closely. They knew when you were trying to reach your soulmate. They knew when your soulmate was emotionally vulnerable. They even seemed to know details that should have remained private between the two of you. Suddenly your soulmate remembered moments they had dismissed years ago, conversations repeated by people who should never have known about them, private feelings somehow becoming family discussions, and decisions being questioned before they had even been announced. Someone had been much closer to the center of your love story than either of you realized. But your soulmate still wanted to believe there had to be another explanation. Maybe they were only concerned, they said quietly. Maybe they thought they were protecting me. The person from your past shook their head. That is what I told myself too. Until I saw what happened next. Another screenshot appeared. This one contained a message sent shortly before your soulmate completely withdrew from you. The person behind the interference had written that your soulmate was finally starting to believe it. Your soulmate froze at those words. Starting to believe what? The answer appeared only a few lines below. They had been trying to convince your soulmate that your silence meant rejection, while at the same time making sure certain messages from you never reached them in the way you intended. Suddenly your soulmate remembered waiting for something from you. A call. An explanation. Anything. They had waited longer than anyone knew. Every time their phone lit up, part of them hoped it would be your name. Every night they tried convincing themselves they did not care anymore, but deep inside, they were asking the same question: if what we had was real, why did you disappear without fighting for it? Now they were beginning to understand that perhaps you had never disappeared in the way they believed. The person from your past explained that there had been an attempt to deliver something from you during those final days. It was not some dramatic declaration. It was simply your attempt to make the truth clear before the misunderstanding became permanent. But someone else learned about it first. What happened afterward was exactly what the returning person had regretted for all this time. Your message was discussed, interpreted, and turned into something completely different before your soulmate ever had the chance to understand what you actually meant. Don't skip this, because this was the moment your soulmate stopped defending the past. They asked to see everything. Every saved message. Every date. Every conversation. Every conversation. Every piece of evidence that had survived. And as they went through it, a pattern became impossible to ignore. Whenever you moved closer, someone created distance. Whenever your soulmate questioned the story they had been told, someone gave them another reason to doubt you. Whenever either of you seemed ready to speak honestly, circumstances suddenly became complicated. What had once looked like a series of unfortunate misunderstandings now looked far more deliberate. Your soulmate stood up and walked away from the table for a moment. Their emotions were no longer simple. This was not only sadness. It was anger at themselves, anger at the person who interfered, and perhaps most painfully, grief for the time that could never be returned. They remembered the last conversation between you. They remembered how guarded they had sounded. They remembered expecting you to understand why they were pulling away even though they never told you what they had been told. And now they wondered what that conversation must have felt like from your side. You had been standing there trying to understand why someone who once knew your heart suddenly looked at you as though you had become a stranger. That realization hurt. Because your soulmate finally understood something they had never allowed themselves to consider, you may have walked away confused, not uncaring. You may have stopped fighting because every door seemed to close without explanation. You may have believed your soulmate had made a clear decision against you when, in reality, they were reacting to a story about you that someone else had constructed. The person from your past then admitted why they had finally returned. For a long time, guilt had followed them. They had convinced themselves that revealing the truth would only reopen old wounds. They thought perhaps both of you had moved forward and exposing what happened would serve no purpose. But recently, they learned something that changed their mind completely. Your soulmate had never truly stopped asking about you. Not openly. Not constantly. But enough. A question here. A memory there. A quiet reaction whenever your name was mentioned. And eventually the person from your past realized that silence was no longer protecting anyone. Silence was protecting the lie. Your soulmate returned to the table and asked the question they had been avoiding. Who did this? For the first time, the person from your past looked nervous. They had shown the evidence, but naming the person behind it was different. Because this was not a random stranger. This was not someone standing far outside the relationship. This was someone your soulmate had trusted enough to believe without demanding proof. Your soulmate asked again. Who made me believe those things about them? The person from your past slowly reached into the envelope and removed one final folded page. Before placing it on the table, they said, "There is something you need to understand first." This person did not begin interfering because they hated you. They were afraid of what would happen if the two of you stayed together. That changed everything. Because hatred would have been easier to understand. Fear meant there was another secret. Your soulmate opened the page. There was a name at the top. The moment they recognized it, their expression changed completely. "No," they whispered. The person from your past did not respond. Your soulmate looked again, hoping they had misunderstood. But beneath the name was a conversation containing details only that person could have known. And suddenly another memory returned. A warning your soulmate had received long ago. A warning they had dismissed as simple concern. You need to let this relationship go before something comes out that cannot be taken back. At the time, Your soulmate thought those words meant you were hiding something. Now they realize the warning may never have been about you at all. Your soulmate demanded to know what this person had been afraid of. Why would keeping you apart matter so much? What could possibly be exposed if the relationship continued? The person from your past hesitated. Then they revealed the final piece. There had been another secret connected to your separation from the very beginning. Something involving a decision made before you even understood that people around the relationship were taking sides. And according to the evidence, the person who interfered had not acted completely alone. Someone else knew. Someone else agreed. And someone else had helped make sure your soulmate never heard your full side of the story. Your soulmate stared at the final page, realizing that what they had believed was the ending of a relationship might actually have been the result of a hidden agreement. Then they noticed one last line written at the bottom. A line the person from your past had not yet explained. If they ever discover what really happened, everything we protected will fall apart. Your soulmate slowly lifted their eyes. What were they protecting? The person from your past took a long moment before answering. Then they placed one final sealed piece of evidence on the table. And said quietly, "This is the reason they needed the two of you separated." Your soulmate did not open the sealed evidence immediately. For several seconds, they simply stared at it, because something inside them already understood that whatever was hidden there would divide their memories into two different versions: the life they believed they had lived, and the truth that had actually been happening around them. The person from your past sat quietly across from them, watching the confusion spread across their face. Your soulmate finally asked, "How long have you had this?" The answer made the moment even heavier. "Long enough to know I should have brought it to you sooner." There was regret in that voice, but your soulmate was no longer focused on apologies. They wanted answers. They wanted to understand why people they trusted had been so afraid of one relationship, one connection, one future involving you. They slowly opened the seal. Inside was not some dramatic confession written for them to discover. It was something far more believable and painful, a record of conversations between people who had been discussing your relationship as though neither you nor your soulmate deserved to make your own decisions. The earliest conversation had taken place while things between you were still good. Your soulmate could tell from the date. They remembered that period clearly. You were still talking. There had been laughter, plans, and those quiet conversations about what life might look like if the two of you stopped being afraid and actually chose each other. Yet while you were imagining a future together, someone else was already discussing how that future could be prevented. One sentence immediately caught your soulmate's attention: "If this becomes serious, they will start asking questions." Your soulmate looked up. "What questions?" The person from your past answered carefully. "Questions about why certain things happened before you two met. Questions about decisions your family never wanted reopened." Suddenly the interference looked different. This had never been only about whether someone approved of you. It was connected to something older. Something the relationship threatened to bring back into the light. Your soulmate continued reading and discovered that one person had repeatedly insisted that the relationship needed to end before you became too close to the truth. But the strange part was that you had never been searching for any secret. You had simply loved someone. You had entered their life without realizing that your presence was making certain people nervous. The proof showed that the fear began when you once asked an innocent question. Maybe you noticed an inconsistency in a story. Maybe you wondered why your soulmate had been told two different versions of an old family decision. You probably forgot about the question soon afterward. But someone else did not. According to the conversation in front of your soulmate, that small question created panic. One person wrote, "They notice too much. If they stay together, eventually everything will connect." Your soulmate felt their stomach drop. All this time they had been made to believe you were the problem, when perhaps the real problem was that you were close enough to notice something others wanted hidden. Don't skip this, because the next piece of evidence changed your soulmate's anger into something much deeper. There was a plan written plainly in the messages. Nobody had intended to confront you directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they planned to create doubt slowly. One misunderstanding would not destroy a strong relationship, but several misunderstandings arriving at exactly the right moments might. First, your soulmate would hear that you were uncertain about the relationship. Then you would be made to believe your soulmate was reconsidering the future. After that, both of you would become more cautious. Conversations would shorten. Trust would weaken. Pride would enter where honesty once lived. Eventually, neither of you would know which problem to solve first. And that was exactly what happened. Your soulmate remembered the transformation now. There had never been one enormous fight that destroyed everything. It happened gradually. A strange comment here. A missed conversation there. A warning from someone trusted. A message interpreted incorrectly. A moment when your soulmate expected you to fight harder, while perhaps you were waiting for them to show you that you were still wanted. Two people were standing on opposite sides of the same misunderstanding, both waiting for the other to cross the distance. And someone had been quietly making that distance wider. Your soulmate covered their face for a moment. "I blamed them," they whispered. "I actually blamed them." The person from your past replied, "And they probably blamed themselves too." Those words struck harder than anything else. Because your soulmate suddenly remembered the final look on your face before everything truly ended. There had been pain there, but also confusion. At the time, they interpreted your silence as indifference. Now they wondered whether you had simply reached a point where nothing you said seemed to change the story being told about you. Perhaps every explanation was questioned. Perhaps every attempt to repair things was met with another wall. Perhaps eventually you decided that loving someone did not mean forcing them to believe you. Your soulmate began asking about the hidden secret again. What exactly were they afraid we would discover? The person from your past pointed toward the final pages. The answer was buried inside a conversation that had taken place before your separation. It involved a promise made between two people close to your soulmate. Years earlier, one decision had been made that affected several lives. That decision had been presented to your soulmate as unavoidable, but according to the proof, it had never been unavoidable at all. Someone had benefited from it. Someone had protected their own reputation. And if your relationship with your soulmate continued, there was a chance old connections between people from both sides would eventually reveal the contradiction. Your presence had unknowingly become dangerous to a lie. That was the real reason someone wanted you gone. Not because you were unworthy. Not because the relationship was meaningless. But because the closer you became to your soulmate, the harder it would become for certain people to control what your soulmate believed. Your soulmate stood up again, but this time they were not overwhelmed. Something had changed. They had spent too long accepting an ending they never completely understood. Now that the truth was appearing, they wanted to know everything, even if it hurt. Does the person who did this know you came here? The person from your past shook their head. Does anyone know you kept these messages? Another shake of the head. Then your soulmate asked the question that changed the direction of the entire conversation. Does you know any of this? No. Your soulmate went completely still. You had no idea. You had lived through the consequences without ever knowing there had been a hidden cause. You had carried whatever pain came afterward without knowing that somewhere, evidence existed proving that the story had been manipulated. Your soulmate walked toward the window and remained there for a long time. They were no longer thinking about confronting the person responsible. They were thinking about you. What would they even say? How could they approach you after so much time and explain that the reason they stopped trusting the relationship was based on information they now knew had been distorted? How could they apologize for believing people who had never understood what existed between the two of you? And most importantly, would you even want to hear the truth now? The person from your past seemed to understand exactly what they were thinking. You cannot change what happened, they said. But you can stop allowing the lie to decide what happens next. Your soulmate turned around. That sentence stayed with them. For the first time since seeing the evidence, their expression changed from shock to determination. They gathered every page, every screenshot, every dated conversation, and every piece of proof. They arranged them carefully in chronological order. They wanted no confusion this time. No second-hand version. No emotional interpretation. Just the truth. Then your soulmate took out their phone. Your name was still there. They had never deleted it. For a moment their finger hovered above it. Memories returned faster than they could control them, the conversations, the laughter, the promises, the last painful silence, and every night afterward when they wondered whether reaching out would only reopen something that was supposed to remain closed. But now they knew something they had not known then. The ending had never been as simple as they were told. Your soulmate began typing. They wrote several sentences. Deleted them. Started again. Deleted everything once more. Because I found out the truth sounded too small. I'm sorry did not explain enough. We need to talk sounded almost cruel after so much silence. Finally, they stopped typing. Instead, they asked the person from your past one last question. If I contact them, is there anything else I need to know first? The room became silent again. And immediately your soulmate knew from the expression across the table that the answer was yes. The person from your past reached into their bag one final time. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that. They removed something that had not been included with the other evidence. It was an old unopened envelope. Your soulmate recognized the handwriting immediately. It was your handwriting. Their face changed. Where did you get this? The person from your past lowered their eyes. You tried to send this before everything ended. Your soulmate could barely speak. I never received it. I know. That answer was devastating. Because suddenly your soulmate understood that while they had spent all those years believing you never tried to explain yourself, there had actually been one final message from you. A message someone had made sure they never saw. Your soulmate carefully opened the envelope. And after reading the first few lines, tears filled their eyes. Because whatever you had written back then proved one thing beyond any doubt. You had not been preparing to leave them. You had been trying to save the love story. But your soulmate had not yet reached the final paragraph. And according to the person from your past, that final paragraph contained the one truth that could change what your soulmate decided to do next. Your soulmate finally reached the last paragraph, and suddenly everything became clear. You had never stopped loving them, you had only stopped chasing a door that someone else kept closing. The letter proved that you were ready to fight for the relationship until you believed your soulmate had chosen to let you go. For the first time, they understood how deeply the hidden interference had hurt both of you. They gathered the letter and every piece of proof, knowing the old lie could no longer control the truth. There was no promise that the lost time could be recovered, but there was finally a chance for an honest conversation. Your soulmate picked up their phone, looked at your name, and stopped being afraid of the past. This time, they did not allow anyone else to speak for them. They sent one simple message: I finally know what happened to us. And I need to tell you the truth. And after everything that tried to destroy your love story, the next chapter finally belonged to you and your soulmate.